You wake up to a world with no heat, no toilet, no fridge, and no internet. Just you, stranded in a silent room, hungry, cold, and staring at an unplugged coffee machine like it owes you something. You might think you'd adapt, that some primal instinct would kick in, that you'd rise to the occasion like a hero in a survival movie. But one day without modern comforts doesn't make you resilient. It strips you down fast. Because what breaks you isn't the darkness or the cold. It's the realization that everything you rely on is gone, and you were never trained to live without it. Most people wouldn't last past the first hour. As soon as the power cuts out, the heating fails, and the house drops below 15 degrees, the modern human transforms into a blanket-wrapped liability, more confused than cold at first, but the cold catches up quickly. The morning routine collapses almost instantly. There's no hot shower to jolt you awake, no coffee to anchor your mood, and no toaster humming its promise of breakfast. Even the fridge gives one final sigh before falling silent, taking with it your dinner plans and the illusion of control. The microwave becomes an inert black screen. The stove stands there smugly, useless and electric. And the kettle, once the symbol of comfort, is now just a jug with a plug and no purpose. So people adapt, but poorly. They check the thermostat like it's mocking them. They press buttons harder as if brute force will bring back the grid. They open the fridge 14 times in 1 hour, expecting food to magically regenerate. Spoiler, it doesn't. The shelves stay cold and useless, just like their optimism. The bathroom offers no relief either. The toilet won't flush. The tap gives a weak trickle, then quits entirely. They stand there, toothbrush in hand, paralyzed by routine. A fleeting thought surfaces. What did people do in the Middle Ages? Followed immediately by, never mind. Some try boiling water for hygiene, but they can't. The stove is dead. The kettle is decoration. Even the emergency camping burner has vanished into garage limbo. They fumble through drawers and cabinets in search of candles. Eventually they find one that smells like vanilla and birthday parties. It flickers pathetically and does nothing for the mood. And this is still before 9 a.m. The cold creeps in like a whisper, first through your socks, then into your joints, then behind your eyes. You layer up in hoodies and blankets and pretend it's enough, even though your breath fogs the air indoors. They try to move, a few push-ups, a jog in place, some shadow boxing. It helps for 5 minutes until the sweat cools and makes everything worse. By mid-morning, a darker realization sets in. Most people don't know how to pass time without screens. No phone, no laptop, no background noise, just silence. Loud, dense, and unfamiliar. They check their dead phone every 10 minutes, like it might come back to life out of loyalty. Some try the radio. Others talk to themselves, quietly at first, then out loud, then without realizing it. With no notifications, no music, no distractions, their thoughts get louder and weirder. Time stretches, minutes bend, hours start to feel personal, and somehow it's still only noon. There's no lunch in sight, unless it's edible cold, doesn't need slicing, and won't crack a tooth. A slice of dry bread becomes a highlight. A spoonful of peanut butter feels like a small win. Someone considers chewing dry pasta, then immediately regrets it. By early afternoon, hunger dulls into background noise. But the frustration and boredom only sharpen. The house feels smaller, the silence heavier, the air colder. By the end of the first 6 hours, most people are physically cold, emotionally depleted, and mentally unraveling. The modern lifestyle was built on scaffolding. Hot water, fast calories, soft light, constant stimulation. Remove those, and the entire system collapses. What remains is unsettling. A person hunched under blankets, staring at the wall in silence, whispering, "This is fine," not because it is, but because there's no one left to contradict them. And perhaps the cruelest realization comes not with the cold or the hunger, but with the clock. Because after all that, there are still 18 hours left to go. Most people assume hunger takes days to set in, but it doesn't. Without electricity, it starts by lunchtime. The average kitchen is filled with food that only exists in partnership with power. Frozen meat, refrigerated dairy, and leftovers meant for microwaves all become useless the moment electricity disappears. Once that partnership ends, reality sets in fast. The fridge becomes a slow-motion time bomb where milk begins to sweat, chicken turns questionable, and eggs stare back with judgment. Every time the door opens, it loses more of its already fading strength. Meanwhile, the stove just sits in the corner, cold, silent, polished, and completely useless. People begin thinking creatively, which is a polite way of saying they panic and do something regrettable. Someone grabs a bag of uncooked rice, without water, without a pot, and without fire. Just dry grains and blind optimism. Others stare at lentils like they're holding out on a secret. One person bites into a raw potato, once and only once. Eventually, a can of beans is found, and for a moment, hope returns. That is, until someone realizes the only working can opener is electric, and the manual one is either broken, missing, or last seen in 2017. A few try to make a fire with no wood and no matches. They attempt to rub sticks together for about 30 seconds, then stop. They reach for their phones to look up instructions, forget they're dead, and briefly consider crying instead. Meanwhile, hunger tightens like a vice. And it's not the casual I could eat kind, it's the headachy, light-headed, irrational frustration kind that turns people from polite to primitive in under 3 hours. With nothing warm available, they turn to raw alternatives. Spoonfuls of peanut butter, cold soup from the can, and cheese slices eaten with quiet shame become standard. Someone eats half of a frozen pizza without cooking it. Someone else tries to boil water using a tea light candle and a spoon. No one talks about it afterwards. At this point, the average person learns something deeply unflattering. Convenience was most of their diet. Without heat, tools, or delivery apps, food doesn't just become limited, it practically disappears. They can't bake, blend, or even toast anything. They go searching for non-perishables like crackers, protein bars, or dried fruit, and that supply barely lasts an hour. By mid-afternoon, they're chewing stale cereal straight from the box and staring at the dog's treats with more interest than anyone's comfortable with. And just as the hunger settles in, dehydration arrives. No power means the water pump fails, the pressure drops, and filtration stops entirely. People start rationing bottled water from that emergency pack they always meant to buy, but never did. Then comes the emotional collapse, the realization that coffee is no longer an option. It's not just about caffeine, it's about identity, purpose, and peace of mind. There's no warm cup, no comforting ritual, no mental reset, just cold water and the kind of rage that simmers deep. Someone tries to make tea, but without boiling water, it's just a bitter bag floating in disappointment. Eventually, someone decides to forage, which in modern terms means walking in circles around the kitchen, checking the same shelf 5 times, and hoping new food spawns. When that fails, they venture outside, clinging to the last hope that the store might still have supplies. It doesn't. It has panic. People argue over stale crackers. Employees hide behind empty shelves. One man offers $20 for 4 boiled eggs. Bartering breaks out. Begging follows. One person trades a Bluetooth speaker for a moldy loaf of bread. The speaker doesn't work, and the bread shouldn't be eaten, but they shake hands anyway. Back at home, hunger starts to erode logic. People become irritable, quick to snap, accusing each other of hiding food. They check the trash for edible regrets. Someone wonders aloud if toothpaste has calories. At this point, they're not starving. They're just broken. No one ever taught them how to function without electricity, fire, or Uber Eats. By early evening, the kitchen looks like a battlefield. Empty wrappers, open cans, and one spoon with peanut butter crusted onto it like a war trophy. The fridge is now just a damp box of bacteria, and the stove is a polished grave. And standing in the center of it all is someone hungry, humbled, and holding a spoonful of cold beans like it's the last fine meal on earth. Because one day without modern food systems doesn't build resilience. It reveals just how fragile survival really is when your tools don't turn on. Your food doesn't function without heat, and your instincts are no match for a sealed can with no opener. By late afternoon, people start to notice something strange. Not in the mirror, those don't work without light, but in the air, in the room, and eventually in themselves. It begins with a smell, faint at first, then suddenly obvious, and soon completely inescapable. Because without electricity, hygiene isn't just difficult, it disappears altogether. Let's start with the bathroom. There's no running water, and the toilet doesn't flush. People open the lid, stare into it, and slowly close it again, like they've seen something they won't emotionally recover from. So what's the solution? Buckets filled with bottled water and a little hope. And even then there's the awkward question of where to empty it. The yard, the street. That's how cholera started. and nobody wants to go medieval in more ways than one. Hand washing is theoretically possible if you have clean water, soap, and time to care. Most don't. So they rinse their hands in cold, greasy water, wipe them on their shirts, and pretend it counts. It doesn't. Showers are out of the question now that hot water is gone. Unless someone volunteers to dump icy water over their own head, which is unlikely, the sweat stays where it is. Hair gets heavy, armpits develop their own ecosystems, and mouths begin to taste like something between stale air and regret. Toothbrushing is technically possible, if you can find water. Toothpaste might still be around too, but even then the routine is hollow. There's no tap to rinse from, no glass to spit into, and no minty finish to make it feel complete. Just foam and frustration. People begin to feel itchy, not because of insects yet, but because they're suddenly aware of every square inch of skin. Clothes feel sticky, scalps feel tight, and socks feel like slow torture devices. Deodorant runs out, wet wipes dry up. Perfume is sprayed not for scent, but like a crime scene cover-up. The house starts to smell, lived in, but not in the cozy way. It's the undisturbed, slightly decaying kind of lived in. Trash piles up, dishes stay dirty, and the sponge in the sink now smells worse than the bin. Without hot water, people give up on clean and settle into a new category called barely tolerable. That's when the mental shift begins, because hygiene isn't just about avoiding illness, it's about keeping control. Clean routines form boundaries between yourself and the outside world. When those break down, people start to lose their sense of identity. They begin to feel like animals, greasy, itchy, sluggish, and vaguely sour. They avoid mirrors, stop adjusting their clothing, speak less, laugh less, and move only when they must. They curl inward, not from depression, but because their own body no longer feels familiar. It smells wrong. It feels wrong. It behaves like it's not theirs anymore. And no amount of hand sanitizer can save them, especially since they used the last one as emergency cologne hours ago. And just to be clear, this isn't day 3, this is still day 1. The breakdown doesn't wait. It seeps in through sweat, silence, and the sticky film that clings to your teeth, erasing the sense of being in control before you even notice. Because modern comfort didn't just keep people clean, it allowed them to feel human, dignified, and separate from the grime of the world. Take that away, and what remains is something anxious, smelly, sticky, and unfamiliar. You don't just sit in a room with it, you become it. And the worst part is, the version of yourself you're stuck with doesn't even feel like you anymore. When the sun sets and there's no electricity, most people finally learn what true darkness is. Not low light, and certainly not the soft ambience of a candle, but complete, smothering blackness that swallows walls, stretches time, and pushes into the space between your thoughts. In modern life, darkness is always optional. It's diluted by streetlights, standby LEDs, phone screens, and glowing clocks. Remove all of that, and what remains is something unfamiliar and deeply uncomfortable. The first thing people notice is how loud the silence becomes. Without humming appliances or glowing screens, homes transform into echo chambers. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind against a window, suddenly feels deliberate and slightly ominous. Some scramble for candles, only to find they're scented, half-melted, or buried beneath dusty boxes of seasonal decorations. Matches are missing, lighters are dead. Flashlights were never bought in the first place. For most people, preparedness ends at the light switch, so they sit, in a chair, in a room they once knew, and watch their own hands vanish into the dark. Time begins to stretch. Evenings that used to pass quickly now feel painfully long. No notifications, no background noise, no multitasking. People attempt to be productive. They write things down, and their own handwriting surprises them. It's shakier than they remembered. They try reading, but abandon the page after a single paragraph. Their attention span isn't broken. It's just never had to operate like this before. Then the body begins to tighten, eyes strain, ears overcompensate. Even breathing feels louder. The brain starts supplying explanations for every minor sound. That was just the heater shifting, right? Or the floor settling. Probably, but the doubt lingers longer than it should. For many, sleep becomes the only available escape. But sleeping in true darkness isn't soothing. It's unfamiliar and unsettling. Rooms that once felt safe now seem distant and wrong. Furniture becomes silhouette. Shadows start to move. Some people report feeling watched, not by someone, just by the overwhelming presence of nothing. Anxiety rises. Some light a candle and let it burn all night just to have a center. Others wrap themselves in layers, not for warmth, but as a form of makeshift armor. The average person doesn't sleep through the night. They drift in and out. They wake for no reason. They check the clock, which no longer glows. They reach for their phone, still lifeless. By 2 a.m. the air feels heavier and the walls seem closer. And most begin to ask the question they never thought would cross their minds. How did people live like this? The truth is they didn't. Not like this. They lived in groups. They gathered by firelight. They planned their nights with ritual and rhythm. Darkness wasn't a surprise. It was expected, and they built around it. Modern humans don't do that. They fill every gap with light, with sound, with motion and distraction. So when that gap returns, it doesn't just feel empty, it feels unbearable. By morning, people aren't refreshed. They're frayed. Not from activity, but from the sheer weight of having no barrier between themselves and the dark. And the most terrifying part is that was just one night. At first, most people believe that the physical discomfort will be the hardest part of losing power. They brace for the cold, anticipate the hunger, and prepare for the weight of darkness. But by the end of the day, it's not the body that suffers most. It's the mind. Modern life runs on invisible rails that are held together by technology and timing. Notifications, reminders, and digital rituals shape our days and create a sense of structure. When those vanish, what's left is an eerie silence and a mind with nothing to hold on to. Most people begin the day with quiet optimism. They tell themselves they'll get things done, enjoy the break, maybe even reconnect with something deeper. But by midday, that sense of purpose starts to dissolve into stillness. Without devices to mark the passing hours, time becomes strange and untethered. There are no alerts, no agendas, and no cues to transition from one moment to the next. Instead, there is just a long, quiet drift through unstructured space. Some try to rebuild their routines by creating lists, organizing drawers, or tidying rooms. But without urgency, every task feels optional, and most are quietly abandoned. Even movement loses meaning when there's no reason to track what comes next. This creates a strange psychological tension. There is nothing urgent to do, but also nothing strong enough to drown out the noise in your head. And so the mind turns inward, looking for something to focus on. Arguments replay, regrets resurface, and imagined problems emerge just to fill the empty space. With no screens to scatter attention, that attention sharpens, and often cuts deep. For many, this is their first real experience of uninterrupted consciousness. Some people pace back and forth through rooms they've already cleaned. Others lie down and drift in and out of unsatisfying naps. A few sit frozen, staring at a dead phone like it might return to life if they wait long enough. The absence of communication begins to feel heavier than the silence itself. You're not just separated from others, you're disconnected from the world entirely. No messages, no news, no context, just walls and breath. It's in that isolation that something deeper begins to unravel. People start questioning how much of their identity depended on being constantly connected. And when the answer feels uncertain, the emotional pendulum begins to swing. Irritation builds unexpectedly, followed by moments of clarity that collapse just as quickly. Small bursts of energy flicker and fade, replaced by emotional fatigue and confusion. Mental rhythm vanishes, and without it, every feeling hits harder. The brain wasn't designed to operate in this kind of stillness. Even basic conversation falters when there's no energy to bounce off. Some go quiet entirely. Others talk to themselves to fill the void. They begin narrating their movements out loud, not out of madness, but out of the human need for interaction. In the absence of background noise, even the most mundane voice becomes something to hold on to. It's a coping mechanism, but it's also a mirror of just how much has been lost. By evening, exhaustion takes over, not from doing too much, but from having to manually steer every decision. When you're used to being nudged, prompted, and rewarded, thinking for yourself becomes unexpectedly draining. There's no dopamine, no frictionless flow, just resistance. But instead of grounding themselves, They froze in place, mentally stalled by the silence they thought would bring clarity. They flailed not because they were incapable, but because they had never needed to think without systems doing the scaffolding for them. Without those invisible supports, even stillness becomes overwhelming. That's the real collapse. It isn't caused by hunger, cold, or even isolation. It's caused by the quiet realization that comfort wasn't luxury. It was the invisible framework keeping everything upright. And when that framework is removed, people don't tap into some forgotten instinct or primal strength. They don't rise. They wander, disoriented by their own disconnectedness. It doesn't take a catastrophe. It doesn't even take days. All it takes is one day, without structure, without feedback, without escape. Most people assume they'd tough it out. They imagine they'd push through the cold, stay calm through the silence, and handle a day without screens with quiet resolve. But that confidence fades quickly when the reality sets in. They don't break because the experience is physically hard. They break because it's mentally empty. No structure, no stimulation, and no signal to anchor the day. Time stretches out. Tasks lose meaning. Thoughts loop without end. Modern comfort wasn't just indulgence, it was cognitive infrastructure, a framework that gave shape to focus, rhythm to thought, and boundaries to chaos. Without it, even a single day becomes a challenge most people aren't built to pass. If this video made you grateful for your light switch, your hot shower, or your phone at 2%, hit subscribe. There's more brutally honest breakdowns coming. And tell us in the comments, what would have broken first? Your stomach, your routine, or your brain? Be honest, the power's still out.